Stop for just a moment and truly listen to the steady rhythm of your own breath. Because while you are hearing these exact words, something entirely invisible and completely irreversible is happening to you. Every single second that passes right now is a golden coin spent from a personal bank account that absolutely never accepts new deposits. Yet most people are walking through their days as if they have an infinite balance to draw from. Imagine for a second that you were handed a digital countdown clock that hovered right above your head, visible to everyone in the world except for you, displaying exactly how many years, months, and seconds you have left until your unique story permanently ends. If you possess the ability to look up and see that ticking clock, would you honestly still be scrolling mindlessly through your digital feeds? Or would you immediately turn to look deeply into the eyes of the person you love the most? If you suddenly knew that you only had a few thousand mornings left to witness the sun slowly rising over the horizon, would you genuinely spend your precious energy complaining about the morning traffic or the cold weather outside? We are all born into this world with a terminal diagnosis called humanity. Yet we tragically spend the vast majority of our waking hours in a state of psychological sleepwalking, constantly delaying our happiness and our joy until a later date that is never actually guaranteed to arrive. The average human life lasts for approximately 4,000 weeks in total, and once a single week is gone, it is gone forever into the void, leaving behind only the permanent memory of exactly how you chose to invest it. This audiobook is not a dark guide on how to fear the inevitable end, but rather a powerful manifesto on how to use the absolute reality of your mortality as the ultimate rocket fuel for a life filled with deep purpose, aggressive presence, and profound human connection. We are going to aggressively strip away the meaningless distractions of the modern world and get right back to the core of what it actually means to be alive. Because the absolute truth is once you truly realize you are going to die, you finally, for the very first time, start to truly live. Chapter 1. The Math of Mortality. The human brain is an incredibly complex and beautiful biological machine, but it possesses one fatal cognitive flaw that quietly ruins millions of lives, which is its absolute inability to accurately comprehend the true scarcity of time. When you are young and healthy, the concept of living for 80 years feels like an infinite, endlessly stretching ocean of opportunity, effectively tricking your mind into believing that you have an unlimited reservoir of days to accomplish your goals and tell your family how much you truly love them. But we need to aggressively strip away the vague poetry of aging and look directly at the cold, hard mathematics of a human lifespan, breaking it down into a tangible, physical currency that your brain can actually process and understand. If you are fortunate enough to live to be exactly 80 years old, you get roughly 4,000 weeks on this planet, from the moment you take your very first breath to the moment you take your very last. Imagine for a second that you have a large glass jar sitting right in the middle of your kitchen counter, and inside that transparent jar are exactly 4,000 shiny glass marbles. Every single Sunday night, before you go to sleep to start a brand new week, you are forced by the uncompromising laws of the universe to walk over to that kitchen counter, reach into the jar, take one single marble out, and throw it completely away into the trash. You can absolutely never earn that marble back. You cannot buy more marbles with all the wealth in the entire world. And you absolutely cannot pause the mandatory Sunday night ritual, no matter how tired or emotionally unready you might feel. If you are currently 30 years old, you have already thrown away over 1,500 of those precious marbles, leaving you with a drastically shrinking supply to build your entire legacy, experience profound joy, and raise your children. When you operate under the profound delusion that your supply of marbles is infinite, it becomes incredibly easy to waste an entire week arguing with a bitter coworker, stressing over a minor traffic jam, or mindlessly watching television shows that you do not even genuinely enjoy. But when you physically visualize that glass jar getting emptier and emptier every single week, your entire perspective begins to shift, forcing you to develop a sudden and intense hypersensitivity to exactly how you are allocating your remaining wealth. Time is the only currency in the entire universe that you are completely forced to spend every single second, whether you actually want to or not. This specific chapter is marked as vital listening, because until you radically accept the undeniable mathematics of your own mortality, you will continuously trick yourself into believing the comforting lie that you have plenty of time left to start living. You will keep telling yourself that you will prioritize your mental health next month, that you will finally take your spouse on that romantic getaway next year, or that you will stop working 80 hours a week when your bank account hits a certain arbitrary number. But the jar does not care about your future plans, and the universe does not pause the countdown just because you are currently too busy to pay attention to the people sitting right across the dinner table from you. You must radically accept that your personal jar of weeks is constantly draining, and you must use that jarring realization not as a source of paralyzing anxiety, but as the ultimate liberating permission slip. When you truly understand the absolute math of mortality, you stop asking for permission to be happy, and you start aggressively protecting your remaining weeks from anyone or anything that does not bring you profound peace and undeniable joy. Chapter 2. The Illusion of Someday. The word someday is arguably the single most dangerous and destructive word in the entire human vocabulary, representing a mystical and entirely imaginary land where we subconsciously send all of our deepest desires, our grandest dreams, and our most meaningful relationships to quietly wither away and die. We constantly convince ourselves that someday, perhaps when the children are a little bit older, when the massive mortgage is finally paid off, or when we reach that highly elusive management position at work, we will finally have the time and the mental freedom to actually enjoy our lives. But this is a devastating psychological trap that keeps you perpetually running on a stressful treadmill, exhausting yourself by chasing a beautiful destination that fundamentally does not exist anywhere except in your own mind. Waiting for the perfect time to start truly living your life is exactly like driving your car toward the horizon and expecting to eventually catch up to it, completely ignoring the beautiful scenery passing you by in the present moment. No matter how fast you drive or how many grueling 80-hour weeks you work, the horizon constantly moves further away, and your mythical someday simply gets pushed back by yet another unexpected crisis, another heavy financial obligation, or another incredibly busy season at the office. The universe is an incredibly chaotic and entirely unpredictable place, which means that the perfect, quiet moment you are waiting for to finally take that family trip, start that hidden passion project, or simply sit peacefully with your spouse will absolutely never arrive organically. You cannot wait for the perfect moment to magically appear before you. You have to aggressively carve it out of the present reality with absolute intentionality. When you constantly delay your joy and your presence for the future, you are essentially gambling with the only actual currency you possess, which is the exact second you are breathing in right now. You are foolishly betting the guaranteed present moment against a future that is completely unpromised to you, and the house always wins that bet. Millions of people spend 40 years of their precious, limited weeks sitting at a desk they absolutely despise, sacrificing their physical health and completely neglecting their most vital relationships, all for the hollow promise of a golden retirement that they might not even be healthy enough to actually enjoy when they finally get there. The greatest thief of human potential and deep happiness is not failure, but rather the comforting illusion that you will always have plenty of time to do it tomorrow. We must completely destroy the comforting concept of someday and entirely replace it with the radical, uncompromising power of today, forcing ourselves to take immediate action on the things that actually matter to our hearts. If there is a difficult conversation you need to have, a strict boundary you need to set at work so you can finally be home by 6 o'clock to eat dinner with your family, or a massive dream you have been pushing off for a decade, you have to initiate it right now. The conditions will never be absolutely perfect. The stars will never perfectly align in your favor, and you will absolutely never feel completely ready to take the terrifying leap into the unknown. The only thing you can be absolutely certain of in this entire world is that your personal jar of marbles is constantly draining every single week, regardless of how you choose to spend them. Every single moment you spend passively waiting for someday to arrive is a moment you are actively choosing to throw away forever. So you must aggressively stop waiting for a future that is not guaranteed and start acting fiercely within the day you currently hold in your hands. Chapter 3. The Disease of Being Busy. Modern society has been thoroughly infected by a deeply toxic cultural virus that convinces us to wear our absolute exhaustion as if it were a prestigious badge of honor, glorifying the endless grind at the expense of our own humanity. When you ask someone how they are doing today, the default response is almost always a heavy sigh, followed by a complaint about just how incredibly busy they are, as if having zero free time makes them a more important and highly valuable human being. We have created a backwards world where skipping lunch, answering work emails at midnight, and completely neglecting our physical health are celebrated as signs of ultimate dedication and a remarkably strong work ethic. But the harsh reality is that constantly operating in a state of frantic overwhelm is not a true measure of your worth. It is simply a massive failure to protect your finite and rapidly draining jar of weeks. There is a massive and fundamental difference between being highly productive and merely being busy. Yet most people spend their entire lives sprinting on a mental hamster wheel, completely confusing their constant motion with actual forward progress. You can easily spend 10 hours a day frantically checking off minor tasks, sitting in completely pointless meetings, and responding to a flood of trivial messages, only to look back at the end of the week and realize you have accomplished absolutely nothing of real, lasting value. This frantic state of constant motion is often just a very clever psychological disguise for a deep internal fear. Because as long as you keep yourself completely distracted with an endless stream of minor emergencies, you never have to stop in the quiet moments and ask yourself the terrifying question of whether you are actually moving in the right direction. We must completely shatter the illusion that working 80 hours a week is a flex or a noble sacrifice. Because when you sacrifice your marriage, your relationship with your children, and your own peace of mind just to impress a corporate entity, you are profoundly losing the only game that actually matters. If you were to unexpectedly pass away tomorrow, the company you gave all of your precious time to would likely have a job listing posted to replace you before the end of the week. But your family would feel that gaping, irreplaceable hole at the dinner table for the rest of their entire lives. When you finally internalize that brutal truth, the artificial urgency of that late-night work email suddenly vanishes entirely, and you instantly realize how incredibly foolish it is to give your absolute best energy to your employer while bringing nothing but your exhausted, irritated leftovers home to the people who love you the most. Being perpetually busy is not a sign of high status, but rather a profound form of mental laziness, because it means you have completely surrendered control of your life to the chaotic demands of everyone else. Curing the disease of being busy requires a radical and unapologetic commitment to the powerful word no, forcing you to draw incredibly harsh boundaries around your time, your energy, and your personal peace of mind. You have to deeply understand that every single time you say yes to a pointless obligation, a toxic client, or an unnecessary project, you are simultaneously saying no to your family, your physical health, and your own deeply limited lifespan. True success is not measured by how incredibly full your daily calendar is, but rather by how much empty space you have deliberately protected to simply breathe, think, and exist without any pressing obligations whatsoever. As we prepare to pivot into the actual mechanics of working much smarter, you must first mentally resign from the modern cult of constant hustle, completely forgiving yourself for the times you mistakenly prioritized a temporary paycheck over a permanent, beautiful memory. You are now stepping into an entirely new paradigm, where your ultimate goal is not to do more things, but to passionately execute only the few things that truly matter, leaving the trivial noise behind so you can finally reclaim your stolen freedom. Chapter 4. Efficiency is freedom. Now that we have completely shattered the toxic illusion that being perpetually busy is a badge of honor, we must pivot toward the actual mechanics of reclaiming your finite and rapidly shrinking supply of weeks. The profound secret to escaping the modern trap of the endless, soul-crushing grind is fundamentally understanding that not all of your hours are created equally, and not all of your daily tasks deserve an equal portion of your highly limited lifespan. We are going to completely decouple your physical time from your actual output, shifting your entire paradigm away from how many hours you sit at a desk and directly toward the raw, undeniable impact of the work you actually accomplish. There is a universal law of imbalance known as the 80-20 rule, which dictates that in almost every single area of your life, Roughly 80% of your desired results will come from exactly 20% of your actual efforts. When you sit down at your desk for a standard 8-hour workday, you are likely only doing about 2 hours of deeply impactful, high-leverage work that truly moves the needle forward in your career or your business. The remaining 6 hours are almost entirely consumed by performative filler, mindless procrastination, entirely unnecessary meetings, and the constant checking of an overflowing inbox just to maintain the optical illusion that you are working incredibly hard. When you view your daily schedule through the ruthless lens of your own mortality, knowing exactly how few marbles you have left in your jar, you realize that spending 6 hours a day on performative filler is an absolute tragedy. You have to become aggressively protective of your energy, identifying the vital 20% of tasks that actually generate your income, your success, and your forward momentum, and then ruthlessly eliminating, delegating, or completely ignoring the trivial 80% that simply drains your soul. If you can condense your absolute highest leverage work into 4 hours of deep, uninterrupted, fiercely protected focus, you can essentially buy back the entire second half of your day to spend entirely on your own terms. Efficiency is not about cramming more meaningless tasks into your already exhausted day. It is about violently cutting away the useless fat so you can finally buy back your absolute freedom. Working smart means that you entirely reject the outdated Industrial Revolution mindset that directly equates your personal value with the sheer number of exhausting hours you punch into a company time clock. You are not a machine built to maximize daily output until you inevitably break down. You are a deeply complex human being with a terminal diagnosis, and your ultimate goal is to generate maximum leverage so you can escape the factory floor. By applying the 80-20 rule to your career, your household chores, and even your social obligations, you will suddenly find yourself in possession of massive blocks of reclaimed time that you previously thought were gone forever. But simply buying back your time is only the very first half of the equation, because an empty schedule is entirely useless if you do not know how to consciously invest those newly liberated hours. The absolute worst thing you could possibly do is use this newfound efficiency just to take on even more stressful work projects, completely defeating the entire purpose of working smarter in the first place. As we move into the next phase of our journey together, we are going to take every single hour you just forcefully reclaimed from the corporate machine and reinvest it directly into the only sanctuary that truly matters when the final countdown begins. Chapter 5. The Wealth of the Dinner Table. There is a devastatingly common tragedy that plays out in the modern world every single day, where highly ambitious individuals spend 40 years aggressively climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing their physical health and their most precious relationships, only to finally reach the very top and realize the ladder was leaning against the entirely wrong wall. They accumulate massive bank accounts, drive incredibly expensive cars, and acquire impressive titles that command respect in the boardroom. But they come home to an entirely silent house where their children have grown up without them, and their spouse feels like a complete stranger. True wealth is not defined by the artificial digits sitting in your investment portfolio or the prestigious accolades attached to your professional resume. True wealth is exclusively measured by the depth of the love and the unbroken connection surrounding your own dinner table. We often justify our chronic absence from the home by convincing ourselves that we are simply providing for our families, using our financial contributions as an emotional shield to deflect the guilt of constantly missing bedtime stories, school plays, and quiet evening conversations. But the harsh, undeniable truth is that your children do not actually want a bigger house, a newer television, or an expensive vacation to a tropical resort anywhere near as much as they simply want your undivided, joyful presence in their daily lives. When you are lying on your deathbed, desperately taking your final breaths, you are absolutely never going to look back and wish that you had spent just one more weekend at the office closing a meaningless business deal. But you will violently ache for just one more ordinary Tuesday evening eating a home-cooked meal with the people you brought into this world. When we successfully implement the 80-20 rule and forcefully buy back those precious hours from the industrial machine, the dinner table becomes the ultimate sanctuary where we must consciously choose to invest our newly reclaimed marbles. It is the sacred space where the heavy armor of the outside world is finally taken off, where you are no longer a manager, an employee, or a business owner, but simply a parent, a partner, and a profoundly mortal human being seeking genuine connection. You have to establish an uncompromising, ironclad boundary at the front door of your home, deciding that the moment you turn the key in the lock, the stressful demands of your career entirely cease to exist until the sun rises again the next morning. The greatest and most enduring legacy you will ever leave behind is not a massive financial inheritance, but the deeply ingrained memory of how fiercely you loved your family when you had nothing else to give but your time. This radical shift in priorities requires an immense amount of personal courage because modern society will constantly try to make you feel guilty for choosing your family over your professional ambition, whispering the persistent lie that you are falling behind your peers. But you must remember the terrifying visual of your personal glass jar draining week by week, understanding that every single dinner you miss is a permanent withdrawal from an account that will eventually hit zero, regardless of how successful your career happens to be. When you truly grasp the absolute finality of your own timeline, you stop chasing the hollow applause of strangers on the internet or colleagues in the office, and you start fighting relentlessly for the quiet, beautiful laughter echoing across your own kitchen. However, physically sitting at the dinner table is only the physical half of the battle, because you can easily occupy a chair while your mind is entirely lost in a stressful email or a distant anxiety about tomorrow. As we transition into the deeply psychological phase of our journey together, we must aggressively tackle the modern epidemic of physical presence combined with mental absence, learning exactly how to anchor your wandering mind to the immediate, beautiful reality sitting right in front of you. Chapter 6. The Currency of Presence. It is a profoundly heartbreaking reality of the modern era that we have entirely mastered the art of being physically located in the exact same room as our loved ones, while our minds are wandering millions of miles away, completely lost in a digital void or trapped in the stressful anxieties of tomorrow. You can successfully use the 80-20 rule to aggressively buy back your evening hours, entirely leaving the office behind and taking your rightful place at the family dinner table. But if your eyes are constantly darting down to the glowing screen of your smartphone, you are still profoundly and tragically absent. We have somehow convinced ourselves that the endless digital notifications and trivial information from the outside world are significantly more important than the living, breathing human beings sitting quietly right in front of us. Attention is the absolute highest and most pure form of love that one human being can possibly offer to another, because your attention is directly tied to the incredibly limited and permanently draining supply of weeks that you possess on this earth. When you put your phone completely out of sight in another room, actively quiet the chaotic noise in your busy mind, and genuinely listen to your child excitedly tell a long and rambling story about their day, you are not just hearing their words. You are transferring your actual life force directly into their soul. The modern world is highly engineered to shatter your focus and steal your remaining marbles, monetizing your distraction with artificial outrage and meaningless entertainment, fundamentally robbing you of the beautiful reality standing right before your very eyes. To truly embrace the massive power of your own mortality, you must radically recognize that any casual conversation with your spouse in the kitchen or any quiet moment spent holding your softly breathing child could theoretically be the very last time you ever get to experience that specific and unrepeatable privilege. If an invisible clock suddenly appeared and informed you that you only had one single hour left to live, you would instantly drop your digital devices, completely ignore your stressful work emails, and fiercely lock your eyes onto the people you deeply love, drinking in every single detail of their faces as if your entire existence depended on it. We must relentlessly train ourselves to deliberately invoke that exact same level of desperate, beautiful presence on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday afternoon, completely refusing to let the incredible miracle of human connection become dulled by the repetitive routine of our daily lives. The absolute most valuable currency you will ever possess is not the money multiplying in your bank account, but rather the unbroken, deeply focused attention you fiercely protect and give to the people who make your rapidly shrinking life truly worth living. Being entirely present requires a highly aggressive and continuous act of daily rebellion against a society that constantly demands your endless digital availability, forcing you to bravely disconnect from the loud and trivial noise so you can intimately reconnect with the deeply profound human experience. It means making the highly conscious choice to sit peacefully in silence, fully tasting the warm meal you're eating without background distractions, and looking deeply into the eyes of the person speaking so they feel entirely seen and profoundly valued. When you finally stop aggressively fracturing your incredibly limited attention across a dozen different screens and 100 stressful obligations, you will instantly discover a profound richness in your daily interactions that you previously thought was completely impossible to achieve. As we begin to master this radical art of unbroken focus, we notice that the massive cinematic events we constantly wait for are not actually the things that define a truly meaningful life. We are now going to shift our perspective even deeper into the microscopic details of your daily existence, uncovering the massive reservoir of immense joy that is quietly hiding right inside the profoundly ordinary moments you usually rush right past without a single thought. Chapter 7. The Art of the Micro-Joy. The human experience is constantly sold to us as a highly curated highlight reel of massive cinematic milestones, convincing us that true happiness only exists in the incredibly rare moments when we finally secure a massive promotion, purchase our ultimate dream home, or take an incredibly expensive and exotic vacation. But if you actually sit down and do the brutal mathematics of your remaining 4,000 weeks, you will quickly realize that those monumental events make up significantly less than 1% of your entire existence on this earth. If you are exclusively waiting for those massive milestones to finally feel a sense of profound joy, you are actively choosing to spend 99% of your incredibly short life trapped in a state of miserable, restless waiting. True fulfillment is not found by constantly scanning the distant horizon for the next massive fireworks display. It is discovered by radically adjusting your vision to recognize the profound and breathtaking beauty quietly hiding right inside the deeply ordinary moments of a standard Tuesday morning. When you fully accept the undeniable reality that your personal jar of glass marbles is permanently draining, the entirely mundane activities you usually rush right past suddenly transform into incredibly sacred and deeply meaningful experiences. You begin to notice the deep, comforting warmth radiating from your morning cup of coffee, the incredibly soothing rhythm of the rain hitting your bedroom window pane, and the beautiful, quiet peace that settles over your house just before the sun begins to rise. These tiny, fleeting experiences are what we call micro-joys, and they are the absolute most reliable and massively abundant source of true wealth available to the human spirit, requiring absolutely no money, no elevated social status, and no special achievements to fully unlock. They are freely given to you every single day by a universe that is constantly inviting you to stop running, to take a deep breath, and to actually participate in the magnificent miracle of your own temporary physical existence. Cultivating the difficult art of the micro-joy requires you to violently reject the numb, sleepwalking baseline that modern society desperately tries to force upon you, demanding that you wake up and become fiercely observant of your immediate physical surroundings. Instead of mindlessly swallowing your dinner while staring blankly at a glowing television screen, you must aggressively anchor your wandering mind to the actual taste and texture of the food, profoundly grateful that you simply get to experience yet another meal on this side of the dirt. When you stop treating the daily journey as a completely frustrating obstacle standing in the way of your final destination, the simple act of driving your car, walking your dog, or even folding the family laundry becomes a deeply mindful meditation on the sheer, undeniable privilege of simply being alive. The grand and sweeping moments of your life are incredibly beautiful, but the true and lasting masterpiece of your entire legacy is ultimately painted with the small, quiet, and deeply ordinary brushstrokes of your daily routine. As you slowly learn to aggressively harvest these tiny moments of happiness scattered constantly throughout your days, a completely new and deeply emotional perspective begins to naturally unfold within your mind. You begin to realize that not only are these incredibly ordinary routines the actual substance of your entire life, but they are also completely temporary and bound by the exact same countdown clock hovering quietly over your head. This specific realization perfectly sets the stage for the most profoundly heartbreaking and beautifully liberating truth of our entire journey together, requiring us to bravely confront the terrifying reality that one day all of these incredibly ordinary moments will simply run out forever. Chapter 8. The Rule of Lasts. Human beings are fundamentally wired to obsessively document and joyfully celebrate all of the monumental firsts in our lives, throwing massive parties for a child taking their very first steps, remembering the exact details of a first kiss, and framing the first dollar we ever earn at a brand new business. But what we entirely fail to recognize, usually until it is far too late to do anything about it, is that for every single one of those highly celebrated firsts, there is an equally monumental and entirely unannounced last. We move through our rapidly draining weeks completely blind to the fact that there will absolutely be a final time you swim in the warm ocean, a final time you drive your car down your favorite street, and a final time you sit quietly across the table and listen to the familiar laughter of your absolute best friend. This concept is known as the Rule of Lasts, and it is perhaps the single most heartbreaking and profoundly beautiful psychological lens through which you can possibly view your temporary physical existence on this planet. If you are a parent, there was a specific, entirely undocumented afternoon when you picked up your young child, held them tightly in your arms, put them gently back down on the floor, and then absolutely never picked them up again because they had simply grown too big. You did not know it was the final time. You did not throw a party to celebrate the milestone, and you likely rushed right through that beautiful moment because your mind was entirely consumed by the stressful urgency of making dinner or answering a late email for your job. When you violently awaken to the incredibly fragile reality that any ordinary action could secretly be the absolute final time you ever get to perform it, the completely mundane details of your daily routine instantly become profoundly sacred. You entirely stop rushing your aging parents off the telephone when they call to tell you a simple story you have already heard a dozen times, because you acutely understand that one day in the entirely unforgiving future, you would gladly trade absolutely everything you own just to hear their voice interrupting your busy day one more time. You stop aggressively sweating the small inconveniences of your life, like the frustrating traffic on your morning commute or the incredibly messy living room, because you realize that even these tiny annoyances are an absolute privilege reserved exclusively for the living. The profound tragedy of the human experience is not that it eventually ends, but that we so rarely realize we are experiencing a beautiful finality until the moment is permanently gone forever. Embracing the rule of lasts is not an exercise in morbid depression or crippling anxiety, but rather a powerful, radical awakening that entirely forces you to extract the absolute maximum amount of joy, presence, and deep gratitude from the specific day you are currently holding in your hands. It firmly demands that you hug the people you love a little bit tighter, look them directly in the eyes a little bit longer, and forgive their minor flaws a little bit faster, consciously treating every single human interaction with the intense, undeniable reverence it truly deserves. When you live with the quiet understanding that your personal jar of marbles is almost empty, the artificial walls of your ego entirely collapse, leaving behind nothing but a profound and desperate love for the deeply ordinary experience of being completely alive. As you begin to master this deeply emotional perspective, actively treating your current relationships and your daily routines as the precious, fragile gifts they actually are, you will naturally begin to think about the lasting footprint you are leaving behind. We must now turn our absolute focus directly toward the future, looking deeply into the mirror of your own mortality to ensure that when your final week actually does arrive, you are completely free from the heavy, suffocating burden of unspoken words and entirely unlived dreams. Chapter 9. Designing a Regret-Proof Life. There is a deeply clarifying psychological exercise that entirely strips away the trivial anxieties of your modern existence, requiring you to vividly imagine yourself lying quietly on your deathbed at the very end of your 4,000 weeks. When you mentally transport yourself to that final, profoundly silent room, the chaotic noise of the outside world completely vanishes, and the opinions of your coworkers, your neighbors, and the strangers on the internet suddenly mean absolutely nothing to you. In that ultimate moment of absolute truth, you will not spend a single second reflecting proudly on the massive size of your investment portfolio, the prestigious job title you sacrificed your sleep to attain, or the flawless aesthetic of your meticulously clean living room. Instead, your mind will violently hyper-focus entirely on the massive, unavoidable weight of your personal regrets, painfully replaying all of the incredible risks you were simply too incredibly terrified to take. When palliative care nurses interview patients in their final days of life, asking them what they wish they had done differently, the answers are almost always identical and entirely heartbreaking in their simplicity. They deeply regret working so incredibly hard at the expense of their family. They regret burying their true feelings instead of bravely expressing their love. And they desperately regret living a safe, predictable life entirely based on the heavy expectations of others, instead of honoring their own hidden dreams. You currently possess the ultimate, unparalleled advantage over those patients, because you are still breathing. Your personal jar still contains a handful of precious glass marbles, and you have the magnificent power to entirely reverse engineer your life starting this exact second. Designing a regret-proof life means that you must begin filtering every single major decision you make through the incredibly wise and entirely uncompromising perspective of the 80-year-old version of yourself. When you are faced with the terrifying choice of whether to finally quit the soul-crushing job, explicitly set a hard boundary with a toxic relative, or intimately ask someone you love for absolute forgiveness, you must consult the future version of yourself who is entirely out of time. That future version of you will absolutely always command you to choose courage over comfort, instantly demanding that you take the massive leap into the unknown, because the temporary pain of failure is entirely microscopic compared to the permanent, agonizing ghost of wondering what could have been. The incredibly heavy burden of living a life that is entirely untrue to yourself is the only debt in the universe that you are completely forced to pay back with the tears of your own dying regrets. To fully insulate your soul against the heavy sting of final regret, you must violently let go of any lingering bitterness and entirely refuse to carry the massive weight of old grudges into your remaining weeks. Holding on to a deep resentment against someone who wronged you in the past is exactly like drinking a deadly poison and simply waiting for the other person to die. It only succeeds in completely destroying the tiny fraction of beautiful days you have left on this earth. You simply do not have enough remaining marbles to waste a single one on anger, petty arguments, or the completely useless desire for absolute revenge against people who likely do not even think about you at all. As we rapidly approach the absolute conclusion of our transformative journey together, it is finally time to stop passively thinking about your mortality and start actively using it as the ultimate weapon of massive creation. We must now gather all of these profound realizations about time, presence, and deep emotional courage and forcefully forge them into an uncompromising daily standard that will define the rest of your beautiful existence. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Action. We have spent this entire journey aggressively deconstructing the modern illusions that keep you trapped in a perpetual state of exhausting busyness. And we have fundamentally rewired your psychological understanding of your own deeply limited timeline. But simply possessing this profound and beautiful knowledge about the absolute scarcity of your 4,000 weeks is entirely useless if it does not immediately translate into massive, unapologetic action within the physical world. The ultimate danger of personal growth is that it can easily become just another clever form of procrastination, tricking you into believing that because you are actively listening to powerful audiobooks and constantly planning your next move, you are actually moving your life forward. You must entirely stop preparing to live, endlessly drafting the perfect blueprint for a magnificent future, and finally start aggressively laying the bricks of your actual existence right now in this exact moment. When we use the word legacy, modern society has completely brainwashed us into picturing massive marble statues, enormous charitable foundations, or incredibly successful businesses with our names permanently plastered across the front doors. But true legacy is fundamentally entirely invisible to the naked eye, because it is strictly measured by the profound emotional footprint you leave behind in the hearts and the minds of the people who actually knew you behind closed doors. Your true legacy is whether your children vividly remember you, constantly staring down at a glowing screen with an irritated expression, or if they remember the intense, unbreakable warmth of your undivided attention when they simply wanted to show you a completely ordinary drawing. It is built in the quiet, undocumented moments when you aggressively use the 80-20 rule to leave the office early, entirely surprising your exhausted spouse by taking over the stressful household chores so they can simply close their eyes and rest. Building this beautiful legacy of action requires an intense daily bravery that most people are simply too terrified to summon, because it demands that you completely stop waiting for the mythical perfect conditions to magically arrive. If there is a deeply hidden passion project you have been secretly dreaming about for the last decade, you must forcefully take the very first terrifying step today, even if it is incredibly small and entirely imperfect. You do not have the luxury of waiting until next year to finally start living as your most authentic self, because your personal jar of glass marbles is completely indifferent to your endless excuses, continuously draining away whether you take the massive leap or whether you stay safely hidden in the comfortable shadows of your own unlived potential. Your legacy is not the massive amount of money you leave behind in a heavily guarded bank account, but the beautiful echoes of your laughter and the fierce courage of your daily actions, continuing to resonate in the hearts of those you fiercely loved. You are now profoundly equipped to navigate the chaotic modern world, not as a passive, exhausted victim of endless external demands, but as an absolute master of your own highly limited time. You know exactly how to violently cut away the trivial distractions, how to fiercely protect the sacred space around your dinner table, and how to look deeply into the absolute truth of your own mortality without an ounce of paralyzing fear. The incredible power of the ultimate deadline is now firmly in your hands, completely ready to be unleashed upon your daily routine to completely transform your existence from a stressful, endless grind into an absolute, magnificent masterpiece. We have now reached the absolute edge of our time together, and there is only one final step left to take before you are released back out into the wild, deeply chaotic, and incredibly beautiful reality of your own rapidly ticking life. Conclusion. The first day. We have officially reached the final moments of our transformative journey together, entirely dismantling the deeply toxic modern illusions that have kept you trapped in an exhausting cycle of perpetual busyness and completely passive waiting. You have bravely looked directly into the terrifying reality of your own mortality, not with paralyzing fear, but with a profound and entirely liberating acceptance of your deeply limited timeline on this earth. The roughly 4,000 weeks you were given at birth are continuously draining away into the void, and the metaphorical glass jar sitting on your kitchen counter will unapologetically demand another precious marble this coming Sunday night. But instead of letting this undeniable mathematics crush your spirit, you have allowed it to completely awaken your soul, finally realizing that the ultimate deadline is the single greatest and most motivating gift you could ever possibly receive. You are absolutely no longer a passive passenger in your own existence, blindly trading your absolute highest energy for the completely trivial demands of a corporate machine that simply does not care about your personal legacy. You now possess the radical, uncompromising courage to aggressively apply the 80-20 rule to your entire life, violently cutting away the useless filler so you can forcefully buy back your freedom and reinvest it where it actually matters. You now deeply understand that true wealth is found exclusively at the family dinner table, that your unbroken presence is the absolute highest form of human currency, and that the quiet micro-joys of an entirely ordinary Tuesday morning are the actual breathtaking masterpiece of your entire existence. You are now fully equipped to completely destroy the highly dangerous illusion of someday and step fiercely into the undeniable, massive power of this exact second. The realization that you have zero time left to waste is not a reason to panic, but rather the ultimate invitation to finally start living the profoundly beautiful life you have been endlessly delaying. In just a few short moments, my voice is going to permanently fade away into silence, and this audiobook will officially come to an end, completely returning the ultimate control of your rapidly ticking countdown clock entirely back into your own hands. The heavy silence that follows these final words is not the conclusion of a story, It is the breathtakingly beautiful first day of an entirely new way of fiercely moving through the physical world. The profound knowledge you have just gained is completely useless if it simply stays locked inside of your mind, which means it is absolutely time to stop passively listening to advice and start actively changing the trajectory of your legacy. I am asking you to do something incredibly radical right now, which is to completely close this application, put your digital device entirely out of sight, and walk directly into the room where the people you love the most are currently waiting for you. Look incredibly deeply into their eyes, completely forgetting about the stressful emails and the massive obligations of tomorrow, and simply give them the magnificent gift of your unbroken attention. Take a massive, deeply grounded breath of fresh air. Feel the beautiful weight of your own heartbeat in your chest, and start passionately living the rest of your beautiful, finite life, because your time is absolutely happening right now. This concludes our journey today. Thank you for listening. If you found value in this, please leave a like. It really helps the channel. I'd also love to hear your favorite takeaway in the comments below. Subscribe for more audiobooks, and I'll see you in the next one.